Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and welcome to another mod with me. Today we are going to be trimming and possibly edging, that's yet to be determined, the Efflorescent Tarot. So this is a tarot deck that is fairly new to my collection, and I absolutely love the imagery of this deck. Now, I've done a complete walkthrough of this deck, so if you want to check that out, I will leave that in the description box below. But one of the problems that I have with this deck is really more in a tactile sense. The deck is made with this kind of, it's either plastic, I think it might be plastic, or really heavily laminated paper. And it's very heavy and very large. So the problem that I'm having with this deck is actually in being able to use it. I can't really get my hands around it to shuffle it. And as I have mentioned in many of videos, when I have to struggle this hard to shuffle a deck, then it takes me out of the space of my reading space. It takes me out of the mindset of being focused in on my reading. Shuffling is part of my meditative process prior to a reading. So when I can't do that, it really impedes my ability to be able to work with the deck. So given that this deck is so very large, it is very heavy, and it's got this plasticky cardstock, it's really, really difficult for me to work with. So I have never trimmed a plastic type deck before. I don't know 100% what this cardstock is. Maybe I will try to look that up. But when I'm having issues with a deck like this, a deck that I really want to work with, a deck that I have tried repeatedly to work with, but it's tactilely or physically hard for me to use in a way that makes sense for me and how I work with my cards, then I need to go ahead and do a modification on it. Now, like I said, I've never modified a plastic deck before. I have no idea if my trimmer is even going to go through it. I also have no idea if it's going to ruin my trimmer. So I guess we'll just kind of experiment with this and do it together. I'm also not sure how my corner rounder is going to react to this type of cardstock either, because like I said, I've never trimmed a deck made of this particular material. I only have one other deck that has a plastic type cardstock, and it's not one that, for one, it's a small deck, I would never need to trim it, and two, it's a limited edition, so I wouldn't trim it. But at any rate, I really do want to be able to work with this deck. So I am going to go ahead and make the attempt to trim it, and just fingers crossed that it goes well, and we'll see, and we'll do it together. So before we get started, let's talk tools. Of course, I have my deck. I have my normal Fiskars trimmer. Fingers crossed that putting this type of cardstock through it is not going to ruin it. I have my little triangle ruler that I use for creating a guide on the other side. So in preparation of this modification, one of the things that I did is I went through each and every card to make sure that where the artwork is printed on the card is relatively the same, because that does matter when you go to do a trim. If you check out some of, I think it was the Mystical Goddess Tarot, the printing was not the same, and so I had to make adjustments for that on kind of a card by card basis. And so one of the things that I did in preparation of this was just to basically pick one card, it didn't matter which one, and I went through each of the rest of the 77 cards, and I kind of lined it up, and I just eyeballed it. It's not exact, but I just took a look at it and went, yep, that's pretty much the same over here as it is over here. And then I scooted it this way, and yep, it's pretty much the same on the top as it is on the bottom. Now with this deck, you can see that all of the cards are slightly printed more to the left and the top. So there's more space on the right side and the bottom than there is on the border on the top and the left side. Not a big deal because I'm going to be trimming, of course, and but it's important to make sure that you take that kind of thing into account, because if one of these was shifted the other way, if I cut and make my measurements according to this left side, and then I come to this card and the printing is actually shifted more to the right than it is to the left, then that's going to throw off, I would end up getting all that white. That's going to throw off my measurement. So it's really important to go through all of your cards and check card by card. It really just takes a minute, and just make sure that the printing is, you know, fairly straight. If you find groupings of printings that they're not, then you can make piles with different printings. Sometimes, particularly in mass market decks, the deck isn't necessarily printed. All of the 7-8 cards aren't necessarily printed in the same run. So you can have variations in where they're printed. You can have variations in color. You can have variations in border size. This particular deck, I believe it said it was, it's printed at a small family press. And so I'm guessing that it probably was all printed at one time or fairly close to it. So all of the images are fairly even, not necessarily centered in the card as we can see here, but they all are printed the same way. So that makes it a whole lot easier when I go to trim it, because I know whatever measurement I set for my right side here should work for all of the cards. Now, another thing in preparation is thinking about what do I want to actually do with this deck. As much as I don't mind the titles on the bottom, they are unobtrusive. I like that on the minors, they're just numbers. As much as I don't mind the numbers, trying to get my measurements to line up where this black line that goes around to be the same width on all of the cards and not get any of that white is going to be pretty difficult. Plus, the smaller I go, the easier this deck is going to be for me to handle and to hang on to, especially because it is a fairly thick deck and it's also a very heavy deck. So as much as I don't mind these, and I think the little handwritten type words are cute, and I really don't mind the border around it, just for my own ease of use, ease of trimming, I am going to go ahead and take it down to the artwork. I also think that this deck is going to be really stunning when it's just down to that artwork. I think that having all of this excess border and then these big chunky title areas, I think all of that sometimes just detracts from the gorgeous artwork that we see in the card. And I really like to free that up when I can. Now, this is definitely a Rider-Waite-Smith based deck, so I believe I should be able to crop the titles off and still be able to read with it just fine. However, if that is not, if you like to leave the titles, or if you don't think you'd be able to recognize them, I think this is a deck that you definitely could trim down to just the titles. Now, before I go through this whole process, or as I'm going through this whole process, I always leave the titles to the end, because there are occasions when I change my mind. Once I get 3 sides off, there's occasions where I'm like, no, I really don't mind the titles now, and I think I might like to keep them. So I always leave that to the end, because that allows me the time to really think about that decision and to really cement that decision, because once I cut those off on one card, they got to come off on all of them. So once I kind of make the commitment to do that, I need to do it. But saving that to the end allows me that time to really sit and think about it and to work with the cards. So now that I've figured out what I'm going to be doing with this deck, I'm going to go ahead and start the process. And I'm going to start with the top of the deck. Now, the thing I have to decide is, am I going to take the black off or not? And the thing is if I take the black off here and I decide to leave the titles, I can crop the bottom off here, right? And that's just going to leave the one black line. I think that would probably be okay if I decided to do that, but seeing as I'm almost positive that I'm going to go completely borderless with this deck, I think that I'm going to go ahead and crop the black line off. For one, it's going to be really hard to make sure that I'm hitting the same space on that black line every time when I'm trimming. And also, I don't know if you can tell, but it's not like a solid black line. It's like a hand-drawn border, which does look kind of cool, but I think that it's just going to be easier for me to go ahead and crop that off and go from there. If you come across the deck like this and you decide you want to take it down borderless and not have the titles on it, just take a quick picture of it before you cut into it, before you cut all the titles off. You can take a quick picture of the whole deck if you want. Just lay it out on your floor and take a picture, and then you can zoom in on that photo if you run across a card that you've taken the title off and now you can't remember what it is. I do that all the time. Until you really get to know a deck really well, that's a great way to kind of go ahead and get those borders off if you want, but still have a visual record of the card. Now, a lot of the decks, particularly the mass market ones, they come with guidebooks that have pictures of the cards in them, so that's not really an issue. But this is an indie deck and it didn't come with a book. So I would just recommend, if that's an issue for you, that you just take that quick picture first so that you can reference that back. As I have a walkthrough on my channel of this deck, I'm not gonna go ahead and do that, because if for some reason I come across a deck that I'm like, a card that I'm like not entirely sure what it is, I can just go back and flip through my video real quick. Probably not as easy as taking a picture, but I didn't actually set out to do all of that first, so I'm not gonna interrupt the process here to do it now. So enough rambling aside, let's go ahead and get started. I am going to be repeating the same process that I do with every deck I trim now, and that is to use my little triangle to create a guide and cut one side at a time, so that I can make sure that I can get those exact measurements, or pretty close to exact, so that my deck will be uniform and shuffle better. Now, the thing I'm wondering is, my trimmer is only, yeah, this is a 5-inch wide or 5-inch long card. So it's going to come real close to the edge of my trimmer, which means I'm not going to have a guide up here to help guide me. So I'm going to have to be careful with my first measurements here, and make sure that, as you can see here, I can slide around up and down. So I'm going to have to be careful with my triangle and make sure that I get it basically just taped on there really good, so that it doesn't go sliding around, because normally I have this little guide up here to lock it up against. So just another thing to keep in mind when you're working with a larger deck. The other thing to keep in mind, if the backs are important to you, you definitely want to keep in mind what the backs are going to look like when they're done. So a lot of times I like to just get one card in here, see about where I think I'm going to have it, and then slide another card with the back over the top of it so I can see roughly where that's going to cut off. I also have a little ruler here, because there is, as I've mentioned 100 times before, I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing it, there is a little gap between my guide and my blade, and it is the exact width of my ruler. So I can use my ruler to see exactly where that blade is going to come down. Now, I have had a couple people ask, can you do more than one card at once? Technically, yeah, you can. I don't recommend it. It's going to be hard on your trimmer, and it's going to have more of a tendency to tear your cards and to shift as you're cutting. So I just recommend, if you want to do a really nice uniform trim that's going to cut, or that's going to shuffle well when you're done, do it one card at a time, one side at a time. Just take the time and do it. It's totally worth it in the end. And I have had a lot of people tell me, like, I make this look super easy, and it's not. Okay, you're right, it's not when you're first starting out, but you do enough of these decks and it kind of gets to be second nature. It does get easier as you do it, the more you do it. So just like anything else, the more you do it, the better you get at it, the quicker it goes. When I'm not filming, I can trim and round a deck in an hour or under an hour, depending on the complexity of the trim, I guess you could say. So like, if you're not sitting here filming it like I am, the more you do this, the better you get at it, the quicker you get at it. So just a note, just an FYI, you know, it does get easier with time. The more you do it, the better you get, just like anything else, right? So to start with, I'm going to take the tops off first, and I've got a piece of washi here, and I'm just going to line up my card. And as usual, I am going to err on the side of caution, and I am going to take a little bit of the imagery off, and we're talking just a sliver, but mostly I'm doing that because I want to make sure that I get that black border all the way off, and I want to make sure that I don't leave any white. And so I am just kind of, like I said, erring on the side of caution, taking just this extra little sliver off. It's because there's no text at the top of this deck. It's not going to it's not going to cause any issues in terms of being able to work with or read the deck. So now comes the hard part, because I don't have a guide up here. So the hard part comes in now making sure that I get this guide down, my ruler taped down really well so that it doesn't slip around. Okay, so now that I have that set, I've got my card in there. I'm just going to double check. The other thing you can do is before you make your first cut, you can double check on a couple cards. It's never a bad thing to double check. Oops. Just make sure that, you know, make sure that everything looks good, and that's where you're gonna wanna cut it. Like I said in the beginning, I have not cut a plastic deck before, so we're going to experience this together, and I'm gonna go slow. So there we have it. Was able to cut that off, and that has a really rough edge now. So that's gonna have to be something that we're gonna have to contend with, because I am cutting plastic, which is probably not the best thing in the world. And I'm just curious here if my trimmer is even gonna go through this. It is, but it's not gonna like it. So that's gonna be something to consider too. Okay, so I'm gonna finish this process, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut the tops off and both the sides, and then we'll come back and maybe take a look at the bottoms before we move on. So at this point, I have finished trimming the tops and both the sides off of the deck, and I do have to say, like, my trimmer is not loving this. I'm having to actually wipe the blade off every couple of cards. I mean, it's not a big deal. I just take the paper towel and, you know, give it a wipe. And then I've noticed that as the blade is going through, it's creating this, like, I don't know, suction point, or it's kind of sticking itself to the trimmer. So the edges of the card are kind of getting stuck against there. And there's definitely rough edges to this now. I don't know, I might go ahead and have to sand it down, but you can definitely tell, like, I've cut into material that really isn't meant to be cut into. So I am just going to preface that and say that this isn't like normal paper, so it's probably not meant to do what I'm doing with it, but I do gotta say, like, look how pretty they're looking. I love a borderless deck. It's so beautiful. So now at this point, I have to decide if I want to keep those titles on the bottom, because I think you could just cut the bottom a little bit off and it would retain the titles, and I don't think the black line looks bad at all. But I think when it comes down to just the numbers, like, that leaves a lot of white space. It's fine with the words, but with just the Roman numerals, it leaves a lot of white space. So I'm just going to go ahead and take the titles off altogether as I originally planned. But now that I've taken that completely off the bottom, look at that. It's completely borderless, and it's so beautiful. I think that's really beautiful. I love a borderless deck. I can tell you right now, these cards are slipping. And when I have to take the sliver off of a plastic cards like this, it's a little bit harder. I think those came out okay. But at any rate, yeah, so that's where we're at with this. I've got taken it down to just that beautiful artwork. At least it's a little bit smaller. It's a little bit easier for me to handle. It probably won't be quite so heavy either, because it's not going to be so big. I really wish this deck was just on normal paper cardstock. If there was to be a release on normal paper cardstock, I would probably buy another copy. Because I have to say that the more I work with this plasticky stuff, I'm really not fond of it. I don't know. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like a tarot deck, I guess. It doesn't feel like a deck of cards. It feels like plastic, and I'm just have to say I'm not loving it. But I do really love the artwork in this deck. So I'm going to go with it and use it regardless of the fact that I don't care for the cardstock. You know, I have some decks that I really don't care for the cardstock, but I love the deck, or I love the artwork, or I love the way it reads, so I use it anyway. But if this deck were available on paper cardstock, I would be, like normal paper cardstock, I would be all over that, because I think that would feel a bit more natural. But we're gonna go with it, because like I said, I love the artwork. I love the energy. I love that it's a unique artwork, something, even though it's very Rider-Waite-Smith, it's very unique in the way that it's presented, and I don't have another deck that is similar in my collection. The closest that I could think of would be the Anna Kay, but I don't think it has quite the melancholy that this deck has. And that's one of the things that I really like about it. So we're gonna keep going with it. And I'm gonna finish cutting the ends off, and we'll see if I can get my corner rounder to actually round the corners of this deck. So here we are, the completely borderless, now trimmed copy of the Efflorescent Tarot. Like I said, those edges are a bit rough. You know, they feel like cut plastic. And I don't know how I feel about that. The deck is still quite heavy, and like I mentioned, it doesn't feel like a tarot deck, and I'm just not. The more I hold on to this deck, the more I'm working with it, even in the trimming, the less I am digging this cardstock. But I've come this far, so I am committed. I am going to go ahead and try to attempt to corner round it. This is really thick. I did save some extra pieces, but to be honest, I don't know that it really matters. It's just, you know, trying to cut plastic with this is not going to be easy. It's possible, as you can see here, but I am going to use the medium on it because the lever is directly across from the medium punch, and you tend to get a stronger cut, a stronger grip with it because it's directly across from it. When you're trying to cut from the medium and the small sides, you're not actually putting pressure directly across from it, and it just doesn't seem to work as well on these really thicker decks. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one in, and I can tell you right now that this is going to have to be a long process because it's not wanting to cut and it already hurts. So I think this is going to be one of those that I'm going to have to do a little bit at a time. Okay. I got it. It wasn't easy, but I got it. So yeah, I think the back looks fine. It's a much better size. I will give it that. Now I can actually like get my hands around it. I'm guessing I'm going to be able to shuffle it better, but I'm just, you know, I'm not really a fan of this plastic cardstock. So I am going to slowly work my way through rounding the corners, and it's probably going to take me a day or two because just doing that one card hurt my hand. Because I had to press so hard, and I'm a little worried that I'm going to break my trimmer. So I'm going to go slow, and I'm just going to do a corner or two at a time, probably throughout the next day or two, and then when I'm done with that, we'll come and check back in. So I managed to get all the corners rounded, and it went okay. My corner rounder definitely didn't like this plastic cardstock. It was really difficult to get through it, and some of the corners didn't come out very well. However, I did find a little sort of cheat, I guess, to do this, which saved my hand and allowed me to kind of do more cards at once. So what I ended up doing was to give me some more leverage, and because my hand is, you know, squishy and it didn't create a solid surface, I just took a deck, a big heavy deck, and I put my corner rounder in here, and I used this to create, I don't know, pressure. I'm not exactly entirely sure how this worked better, but it just did. So by using the deck, I was able to clip those corners a little bit easier. I still have to press pretty hard, but it definitely saved my hand, and it was easier for the corner punch to go through it. I still really could only do a couple cards at a time using this method, and my arm actually got quite sore, but it did end up working. So I was able to go ahead and corner around the deck using my corner rounder. It didn't break, so that's always good. However, I'm curious to see if it caused any issues for when I trim my next deck. So now that we've finished modifying the deck, let's go ahead and take a look at it. I will say that my corners are pretty ragged. All of the edges are very rough and ragged. I have thought about trying to sand it. I used a nail file and that really didn't do anything. It just kind of made this gross sticky mess. So I think for right now, I'm gonna leave it. I'm not gonna do any more to this deck. I'm gonna hope that I can work with it a little bit better now that it's smaller, but it definitely isn't wonderful in terms of the feel of it on the sides. At least it's smaller now, so I can get my hands around it. Let's see, I do need to kind of, some of my corners are not fabulous, but I can get my hands around it. So I can actually shuffle it now, which is nice. And just that right there does make a huge difference for me. Being able to shuffle the deck will mean that I'll be able to work with it a little bit better. I'm not thrilled with the way the deck feels in general. I'm not thrilled with the fact that my edges are, it's not like they're sharp, they're just like, I don't know, raggedy plastic. I don't know how else to explain it. But I can shuffle it. It's a much nicer size now, and I'm not going to call this a fail because it did work. I was able to take the artwork or take the cards down to just the artwork. I was able to get a nice borderless deck. I was able to round the corners. So in all of that respect, it was definitely a success. I'm just not fond of this plastic cardstock. I did kind of try some different inks and some different markers on the edges, and it bled over. Now, the one thing that it did do is actually kind of take that rough edge out, but that rough edge ended up getting like really eating into my marker. So I don't have a marker on hand that I'm willing to ruin to try and edge this deck. And I also am not fond of the way that the black wrapped around the cardstock. In pretty much every ink I tried, the distressed ink wouldn't adhere to it at all, really. And the Crayola didn't work. It came right off. I didn't even save them all because it was just kind of a hot mess. The art marker does work. A Sharpie probably would work. I refuse to use Sharpie because it gives me a migraine. So I could use the art marker for sure, but it definitely left a bleed all along the back. And being that this deck is white primarily on the edges of the back, I just really wasn't okay with that. So I'm not going to edge it at this point. I'm going to just leave it as it is, and I'm going to work with it in the way that it's currently put together, because I think that that's actually going to work okay for me. I think overall it was a success because I really am quite pleased with the way that the cards came out. I really love this deck borderless. I think it's gorgeous. I think it really allows the artwork to really shine, really gives it almost like breathing room, which is funny because usually when we take, usually borders create breathing room. Borders create space. But sometimes borders feel suffocating. And I think that in this particular deck, the borders did feel a bit suffocating. I don't know if that's because they weren't overly large, but the deck is very heavy. It's like twice the weight of a normal tarot deck. And so I think you combine that all together and you just get this kind of really heavy weighted, suffocating feel. And I think pulling it out of its borders and allowing it to really just be open and explore, I think really creates that wonderful space that I was actually looking for. It's not a ton lighter in terms of its physical weight, but at least it's a smaller size that I can work with it. So overall, I'm gonna say it was a success, but it was definitely a challenge. It's not something that I would ever really look forward to doing again, but if I need to and be able to work with a deck, I certainly will. I'm just hoping that at some point the creator re-releases this deck on a normal cardstock, and I would be super happy. In the meantime, I will definitely be working with this version, and I really enjoy it being trimmed and just down to that beautiful artwork. Thank you for joining me for this mod with me. You'll find links for the decks and products that I've used in this video in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this process and will join me again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.